My Redeemer lives, I know. I would sing the song that God was giving me in the place of great pain. I was finding out things that no wife would ever want to know. It became my altar, and the song became my sacrifice of praise that I placed on the altar of my bed. Live. Well, my story began before I even arrived on the scene. It began with my grandparents. My grandmother on my father's side, her name was Bessie Smith, and she was named after her first cousin, Bessie Smith, the Empress of the Blues. Also, my father's first cousin was Little Richard also, so it's kind of like all in the family. And so by the time my sisters and I arrived on the scene, it was kind of written in stone that we would probably sing as well. And so fast forward, by the time I was around 8 years old, one Friday night, I knelt on my knees and I was on the side of my bed. My sisters weren't around. No grandparents were around. My parents weren't around. Bessie Smith, no Little Richard, nobody. It was just me and the God of the universe. And that night I bowed my heart and I gave him my life and I asked him to forgive me of all my sins, to come into my life and to use my life to do something good for him. Now, had you seen me, I was still the same fast talker, a stutterer, the thumbsucker, the bedwetter. But on the inside, I was new because God had changed me. And so my relationship with him began that day. So fast forward about another 4 years, I'm at church, I'm 12 years old, and there's a lady in our church named Sister Dottie. And so I remember that year she came to me and she said, God told her to tell me that God said that he was going to take me around the world singing for him and that he was going to give me songs in the night. But it didn't hit me until later on that he meant songs in the night seasons of life. When life is hard and it's dark and you can't really see your way, he was going to sing over me and sing through me. I felt like, okay, God, here I am, I'm on a journey with you. Then at around the age of 17, I graduated a year early from high school, went to Bible school in Dallas, Texas. And a few years later, I met a guy. You know, he convinced me that really without him, I would be outside of God's will. By the end of that year, we said, I do. My mom said, you should say, I don't. And my dad was like always hey, if she wants it, I have her back. By the time the wedding came around, I didn't have the heart to tell them that he had already hit me the first time. And so for the next 3 years, I lived a domestic violence cycle, a cycle of me being beat, and I would run, and I would come back. I would get beat again, and I would tell some of my closest girlfriends, and then he would say he was sorry, and I'd come back. And it was just a cycle. And I knew I had chosen, and I had chosen poorly, and I thought because of my poor choice that God was marking me off of his list. I thought that he was saying, now you've completely forfeited my will for you because you got yourself in this mess, and I don't know how you're gonna get out. And I remember laying in bed one night, and I was so, I guess I would call it depressed. And I remember just feeling an all-time low. And I remember laying there and I said, okay, God, I know that half the people in Christendom say that if you kill yourself as a Christian, half say you're gonna go to heaven, the other half say you're gonna go to hell. I don't know who's telling the truth, and I don't wanna take the risk. But if you in your mercy could find it in your heart to take me in my sleep tonight, I'd be ever so grateful. I went to sleep believing that when I awoke, I was going to see the face of God. But when I woke up the next morning, I was still sleeping near the enemy who had just abused me the night before. I remember thinking, I can't even die, like I can't get out of this. It was honestly in this night season that God began to sing over me. Not necessarily with the songs that I would write at that time, but songs that other people had written. And he began to speak hope to my heart. And so eventually he got me out of it, and I felt like the biggest failure because I was around the age of 24. I thought, I can't even make it work. I felt old, even though I was very young. I got out of that abusive relationship, but I made a secret vow to myself, and that vow was that if I ever, get into another relationship, that basically I was going to do it my way. Within the next, year or so, that opportunity presented itself. And he didn't beat me. He would take me out to eat. He was, kinder than the last one. But we began to compromise, and we began to do things that the Bible says that we shouldn't do. And before I knew it, I had an unplanned pregnancy. The father of my child and I, we decided to get married and that we were going to raise the child ourselves. The baby was born. She was beautiful. And God gave me grace with her life, but it didn't fix the behavior that had started in our relationship. And so before I knew it, there were betrayals after betrayals that I would have to forgive. I began to write songs, and before I knew it, I was asked to do a record deal. One of the songs on the first album that came out was Redeemer. And Redeemer was a song that I started after I was reading the book of Job. I would sit on my bed and I would play my little guitar. And I would sing the song that God was giving me in the place of great pain. I was finding out things that no wife would ever want to know. It became my altar, and the song became my sacrifice of praise that I placed on the altar of my bed. I know my Redeemer lives. And it was my statement of faith. It was also my war cry. It was my battle cry. It was me saying that in the midst of all the craziness, I'm going to confess in my night season what I believe is the truth now and will be the truth then. God began to give me more songs in the night, in my night season. And he began to comfort my heart. He began to love on me. And before I knew it, what was a comfort to me became a comfort to other people. But it was interesting because I had remembered that in every season, whether I was being abused, Christ showed up and he comforted me. When I was being betrayed, he showed himself as being even more faithful. He showed up and he began to provide. He began to protect me. He gave me songs in the night all over again. He began to give me the right community of believers and sister girls. And so before I knew it, after being a single mom for about 6 years, God chose his son, the right son that he had ordained for me. He saw fit to give me a model, a mentor, a minister, and a great man of God. So he has redeemed my relationships as well as redeeming my life and my eternity. And so when I sing and I say, I know my Redeemer lives, I know my Redeemer lives. My name is Nicole C. Mullen, and I am second.